Every American boy used to remember the weight of his first shotgun more clearly than his first bicycle. For generations, that first gun came down from a closet on a frosty November morning, or waited under the Christmas tree wrapped in brown paper, and it changed a boy forever. We are counting down 15 forgotten shotguns that armed America's young hunters, single shots that cost less than a week's groceries, bolt actions ordered straight from the Sears catalog, and hand-me-downs that smelled of gun oil and grandpa's tobacco. Most have vanished from the gun racks, replaced by black polymer and tactical everything. But once, these were the guns that made boys into hunters. Let us begin the countdown with number 15. Number 15, the Iver Johnson Champion. Before the Champion ever became a boy's gun, it was a grandfather's gun, and that is exactly how most boys got their hands on one. Iver Johnson's Arms and Cycle Works in Fitchburg, Massachusetts started building the single-barrel Champion back in the 1890s, a top-break hammer gun stamped with the Little Owl trademark on the steel butt plate. By the 1940s and the 1950s, these guns had already passed through two sets of hands, and the third pair usually belonged to a 12-year-old. A boy could buy a used one at a hardware store for a few dollars, or simply inherit the one leaning in the corner of the barn. The Champion was plain, heavy, and honest. There was nothing to it but a hammer to thumb back, a single shell, and a steel butt plate that punished anyone who didn't hold it tight. Fathers warned their sons that it kicked like a mule, and they were right, especially the older 12-gauge guns built for the heavier loads of an earlier age. But the Champion taught the most important lesson a first gun could teach, that you had one shot and you had better make it count. Oral histories from farm country recall boys carrying a Champion across frozen fields after rabbits, the owl on the butt plate worn smooth by 3 generations of hands. Today, the Champion is a flea market curiosity, sold for the price of a tank of gas. Yet for the boy who learned to shoot with one, it was the gun that started everything. Number 14, the Savage Model 220. While the old hammer guns dominated the second-hand racks, the Savage Model 220 represented the next quiet step forward, the hammerless single shot that felt modern to a boy raised on his grandfather's relics. Savage built the 220 as a clean, top-lever break action with the hammer tucked safely inside, so there was no exposed spur to thumb back and no temptation to leave it cocked. A father appreciated that. The 220 came in 12, 16, 20, and the gentle little 410, and it carried light enough that a boy could swing it on a flushing quail without wearing out his arms by noon. It sold cheaply through hardware stores and sporting goods counters from the late 1930s onward, often for less than the price of a good pair of boots. The action was smooth, the lockup tight, and the whole gun had a workmanlike simplicity that suited a beginner. Boys carried 220s into the dove fields of September and the rabbit thickets of January, learning the rhythm of break, load, close, and shoulder until it became second nature. Mothers liked that the gun could not hold a second shell, a comfort when their son was first turned loose at the edge of the woods. The Savage 220 never earned the fame of the pumps and autoloaders that came after it, and it vanished from the catalogs without ceremony. But for a particular generation of farm boys, the hammerless Savage was the bridge between the old century and the new, the first gun that felt like it belonged to them and not to a dead relative. Number 13, the Stevens Model 94. If one single shot deserves the title of the great American farm gun, it is the Stevens Model 94. And more boys learned to hunt with one than anyone ever bothered to count. Savage's Stevens line built the exposed hammer 94 from the late 1920s clear into the 1990s, an astonishing run that put the gun into nearly every rural household in the country. It came in every gauge a boy could want, from the booming 12 gauge down to the 410 gauge, and it cost almost nothing, often appearing in catalogs for a price a hard-working teenager could cover with a summer of odd jobs. The 94 was the gun a father handed over without much worry, knowing that the simple break action and single shell left little room for trouble. You broke it open, dropped in a shell, snapped it shut, thumb the hammer, and that was the whole manual of arms. Boys across the heartland recall the same ritual, the metallic snap of the action closing in the cold morning air, the smell of bluing and walnut, the kick that made them flinch the first dozen times and then stop mattering. The 94 fed families during the Depression and through the war, knocking down squirrels for the pot and pheasants for Sunday dinner. It asked nothing but a sharp eye and a steady hand. When pump guns and autoloaders flooded the market, the humble Stevens slipped quietly out of production, but its memory survives in a million attics and gun cabinets, the gun on which an entire nation of country boys cut their teeth. Number 12, the Mossberg Model 185. For the boy who wanted more than one shot but could not dream of a pump gun, the bolt-action shotgun was the answer, and the Mossberg Model 185 was one of the best. Mossberg introduced the 20-gauge 185 in the late 1940s, a sturdy bolt gun fed from a small box magazine that held 2 shells, giving a young hunter a follow-up shot when his first one missed. To a boy, working that bolt felt serious, almost military, like the .22 caliber rifles he had already mastered, and it made him feel a step closer to being a real hunter. The 185 weighed in around 6¼ pounds, solid in the hands, and the 20-gauge load was forgiving enough on the shoulder that a boy could shoot a whole box without dreading it. Many came fitted with an adjustable choke at the muzzle, a clever twisting collar that let one gun pattern tight for squirrels or open for close flushing quail. These bolt guns sold for modest prices through hardware stores and catalog counters from the late 1940s through the early 1960s, the affordable repeater for families who could not justify the cost of a Winchester or a Remington. Boys hauled them through cornfields and creek bottoms, slamming the bolt home on a second shell as a rabbit dodged through the brush. The bolt-action shotgun is nearly extinct today, dismissed as crude by modern shooters. But in its heyday, the Mossberg 185 gave countless young hunters their first taste of a repeating gun without emptying their father's wallet. Number 11, the Mossberg Model 183. Where the Model 185 ruled the 20 gauge, its little brother, the Model 183, owned the 410 gauge, and for sheer first gun nostalgia, few guns match it. Mossberg launched the Model 183 in 1947 as its first repeating shotgun, a bolt-action 410 gauge with a top-loading magazine, and that signature adjustable choke that selected between cylinder, modified, and full with a twist of the muzzle. The 410 gauge is the smallest, gentlest shotgun shell made, and that is precisely why the 183 ended up in so many young hands. It barely kicked, weighed only about 5½ pounds, and a boy could carry it all day through the squirrel woods without his shoulders aching. Old hunters tell the same story across the South and Midwest of a kindly neighbor or a grandfather loaning them a bolt-action Mossberg 410 gauge to chase cottontails and bobwhite quail of the pride of bringing home enough small game to fill a skillet. The 183 stayed in production in one form or another for nearly 40 years, a testament to how perfectly it fit the role of a starter gun. Today, these little Mossbergs turn up at yard sales and gun shows for pocket change, often overlooked by collectors chasing flashier names. But ask the men who grew up with one, and their faces change. The bolt-action 410 gauge was the gun that taught patience, that rewarded a careful stalk, that made a boy feel 10 feet tall when he finally connected. It was small, simple, and unforgettable. Number 10, the J.C. Higgins from Sears. Not every boy got his first gun from a gun store, because in mid-century America, the wish book did the dreaming for you. Sears, Roebuck & Company sold shotguns under its own J.C. Higgins house brand, guns built by established makers, but stamped with the store name and priced for the working family. A boy would lie on the living room floor in the gray weeks before Christmas, flipping through the thick Sears catalog, and there among the sleds and the baseball gloves were the shotguns. The bolt-action J.C. Higgins models in 12, 16, and 20 gauge, promising adventure for a price a father could manage on layaway. When the gun finally arrived, it came in a plain cardboard box hauled in from the truck, and a boy who opened it found a blued, walnut-stalked symbol of trust and freedom. These were honest guns, plain but dependable, the kind that filled game bags for decades without complaint. Men still recall their J.C. Higgins as the gun that was nearly as tall as they were the day their father handed it over at 13, the gun they carried through high school after pheasants and rabbits. The Sears name vanished from the gun business long ago, and the J.C. Higgins brand became a footnote. But for a whole generation of American boys, the Sears catalog was where hunting dreams began, and a plain bolt action shipped in a brown box was the answer to a wish whispered over the pages of the wish book. Number 9, the Western Field from Montgomery Ward. Where Sears had J.C. Higgins, its great rival Montgomery Ward answered with Western Field, and the rivalry put a gun in the hands of nearly every boy whose family shopped at one counter or the other. Ward sold the Western Field line as its private label brand, sourcing the guns from respected American makers, and then stamping them with the store's own name to keep the price down. To a boy, it did not matter whose name was on the receiver. What mattered was that the gun shot and the Western Field shotguns shot just fine, whether single shots, bolt actions, or the occasional pump. They moved through the Montgomery Ward catalog and store shelves by the tens of thousands, the affordable choice for families who measured every dollar twice before spending it. A father could walk into a Ward's, point at a Western Field 20 gauge behind the counter, and walk out having armed his son for the cost of a few weeks' groceries. Boys carried these guns into the same fields and woodlots as their wealthier friends, toting name-brand Winchesters, and the game never knew the difference. The Western Field name died along with the great catalog houses, leaving behind guns that puzzle younger collectors who cannot find the maker. But the men who learned to hunt with one remember the truth, that a store-brand shotgun fired just as true as any other, and that the gun from the Ward's catalog put just as much meat on the table. Number 8, the New England Firearms partner. Long after the old single shots faded, one more break action carried the torch into the driveways and backfields of the 1980s and the 90s. And for a younger wave of boys, the New England Firearms partner was the gun that started it all. New England Firearms rose from the ashes of the old H&R single-shot tradition, building a no-frills break action that sold brand new for less than almost any other shotgun in the store. That low price was the whole point. A father who could not afford a pump gun could still walk out with a brand new partner for his son, a gun with a fresh barrel and a clean stock instead of a hand-me-down's dents and rust. The partner came in every gauge, with the .410 and the 20 gauge youth models leading thousands of boys to their first hunt. It was light, simple, and honest. A single hammer to cock and a single shell to fire. The same lesson the old guns taught dressed in modern clothes. Boys carried partners into dove fields on opening day and squirrel woods on crisp October mornings, learning to make one shot count just as their grandfathers had. The partner proved that the single shot tradition wasn't dead, only waiting, and that a brand new starter gun could still be had for the price of a video game console. It was the last great cheap first gun, the break action that armed a generation raised on cable television and bottle rockets. Number 7, the Harrington and Richardson Topper. No single shot wore its quality quite as proudly as the Harrington and Richardson Topper, and for many boys it was the prettiest gun they would own for years. H&R of Worcester, Massachusetts had been building auto-ejecting single-barrel shotguns since the turn of the century, and the Topper name became the one hunters remembered. What set the Topper apart was the color case-hardened action, a swirling tiger-striped finish that flashed almost holographic in the sunlight, beautiful on a gun that cost only a little more than the plainest single shot. A standard Topper sold for around $28 in the late 1950s, and the Topper 158 ran about $37 by the early 1970s, modest sums that put a handsome gun within reach of an ordinary family. H&R built a Topper Jr. with a shortened stock made specifically for young shooters. One of the first true youth shotguns, sized so a boy could mount it properly instead of fighting an adult's gun. Boys carried Toppers into the same fields as their fathers, the case-hardened receiver glinting as they swung on a flushing bird. The automatic ejector kicked the spent shell clear with a satisfying snap, and the rubber recoil pad softened the blow on a young shoulder. The Topper proved that a single shot did not have to be ugly to be cheap, and that a first gun could be something a boy was proud to carry. Today they sell for a fraction of their worth, undervalued classics waiting for someone to remember how good they were. Number 6, the Savage Model 24. For the boy who couldn't decide between a rifle and a shotgun, Savage built the gun that ended the argument, and the Model 24 became the dream gun of every kid who wanted to be ready for anything. The 24 was a combination gun, a break action over and under with a .22 rifle barrel stacked on top of a 410 gauge or 20 gauge shotgun barrel, two guns welded into one with a single hammer, and a barrel selector to choose which one fired. To a 12-year-old roaming the back 40, this was nothing short of magic. A squirrel sitting still in a hickory called for the rifle barrel and a careful aim. A rabbit bolting through the brush called for the shotgun barrel and a fast swing. With a Savage 24, a boy was prepared for both, and he felt like a frontier scout every time he flipped the selector. The gun handled light and pointed quick, and the simple break action kept it safe for a beginner. Fathers loved that one gun did the work of two, stretching a tight budget while teaching their sons the difference between a rifle shot and a shotgun pattern. Boys carried Model 24s on long, solitary rambles through the timber, the most versatile gun they would ever own, ready for whatever the woods offered up. The combination gun has all but disappeared from American hunting, a casualty of specialization and changing tastes. But for the boys who carried one, the Savage 24 was the ultimate first gun, a whole hunt's worth of possibility riding in two stacked barrels. Number 5, the Stevens Model 311. When a boy graduated from single shots and dreamed of a real double gun, the Stevens Model 311 was usually the one he could actually afford, and it put the romance of the side-by-side within reach of the common family. Stevens built the 311 from around 1920, clear into the late 1980s, and they built nearly 5 million of them, an American double barrel for people who could never have touched a fine English shotgun. The 311 had two barrels sitting side by side, two triggers, and the classic break-open action that snaps shut with a reassuring thunk. To a young hunter, holding a double barrel was a rite of passage. The gun that looked the way a shotgun was supposed to look, the gun in every painting and every story. It was heavy and plain with a forged steel frame built to outlast its owner, and it asked the boy to learn the discipline of 2 quick shots instead of a magazine full. Boys carried 311s into the dove fields and the rabbit thickets, thumbing back to the second trigger when the first barrel missed. Fathers handed them down with pride, knowing the gun would still be shooting when their grandsons came of age. The affordable American double has nearly vanished, squeezed out by cheap imports and the relentless popularity of the pump. But the Stevens 311 gave millions of ordinary boys the feel of a proper double gun, the side-by-side that made a kid feel like a sporting gentleman on a budget. Number 4, the Winchester Model 24. A notch above the workman-like Stevens sat the Winchester Model 24. And for the lucky boy whose family could stretch a little further, it was the double barrel that carried the magic of the Winchester name. Winchester built the Model 24 from 1939 to 1957 as its affordable hammerless side-by-side, a gun aimed at hunters who wanted the prestige of the famous brand without the price of its finest doubles. It had the same 2 barrels and the same satisfying break-open action as lesser doubles, but it wore the Winchester stamp, and to a boy in those years, that name meant something close to royalty. The Model 24 came chambered for the popular gauges, balanced beautifully between the hands, and pointed with the kind of natural swing that made a young shooter look better than he was. A boy who showed up to the dove field carrying a Winchester double stood a little taller, the envy of friends toting plain single shots and beat-up bolt guns. The double triggers taught him to think, to choose his tighter barrel for the longer shot, and the clean lines of the gun taught him that a hunting tool could also be a thing of beauty. The Model 24 had a relatively short run and was never as common as the cheaper doubles, which only made it more coveted. For the boy who inherited one or saved long enough to earn one, the Winchester Model 24 was the gun that proved a first double could carry both a famous name and a lifetime of memories. Number 3, the Browning Auto 5. Some boys did not get a starter gun at all. They got the gun, the heavy humpbacked autoloader that had ridden in their father's hands for 30 years, and the Browning Auto 5 was the great American hand-me-down. John Browning designed the Auto 5 at the dawn of the 20th century, the first successful semi-automatic shotgun ever made, and its distinctive squared-off receiver earned it the nickname Humpback. For decades, it was the gun a serious hunter saved up for, and when that hunter's son came of age, the Auto 5 often came down from the rack as the boy's first real shotgun. It was a lot of gun for a kid. It was heavy. The recoil rocked a young shoulder, and the long recoil action thumped against him with every shot. But there was no greater honor than being handed your father's Auto 5, the gun he had carried through countless seasons, the bluing worn silver where his hands had gripped it. A boy who carried it felt the weight of a tradition, not just the weight of the steel. He learned to load the magazine through the bottom, to ride out the kick, to respect a gun that had been killing ducks and pheasants since before he was born. The Auto 5 stayed in production for nearly a century, a record almost no gun can match. For the boys who inherited one, it was never just a first gun. It was a torch passed from one generation to the next, the family shotgun that turned a boy into the next man to carry it afield. Number 2, the Remington Model 870. Eventually, every boy wanted a pump gun, the action you could rack with a satisfying clack, and for millions of American kids, that pump gun was the Remington Model 870. Remington introduced the 870 in 1950, and it went on to become the best-selling shotgun in American history, with more than 10 million built. The reason was simple: it just worked every single time in mud and cold and sand, with a smooth twin bar action that never seemed to wear out. For a boy, graduating to an 870 was the moment he felt like a grown hunter at last. Remington built youth versions with shorter stocks and lighter 20-gauge frames, size for young shooters, but built to the same rugged standard as the guns the grown men carried. A boy who unwrapped an 870 on Christmas morning held a gun that would still be running long after he had children of his own. He learned the rhythm of the pump, the shuck of a spent shell flying clear and a fresh one slamming into the chamber, the 3 quick shots that gave him room to correct a miss. Boys carried 870s into duck blinds and dove fields and deer woods, the one gun that could do everything. The 870 is still made today, which is exactly why the early wingmasters, with their deep blued steel and figured walnut, have faded into the background, taken for granted. But for the boy who got one as his first real pump, the Remington 870 was the gun that finally made him feel like he belonged in the field with the men. Number 1, the Winchester Model 37. And finally, in first place, the gun that defined the American boy's first hunt more than any other, the Winchester Model 37. Winchester introduced the Model 37 in 1936 in the depths of the Great Depression as a super strong, dependable single shot at a price almost any family could manage. At its introduction, it sold for as little as a few dollars, roughly 1/5 the cost of Winchester's famous Model 12 pump, and over its life, Winchester built more than 1 million of them. The Model 37 was a break action, single shot with a distinctive semi-hammerless cocking spur and an automatic ejector that flicked the spent shell clear with a snap. It came in every gauge from the thumping 12 down to the gentle point .410 gauge, and in 1958 Winchester introduced a special boys model with a shortened stock built for young shooters, sealing its place as the quintessential first gun. There was a perfect simplicity to it. One shell, one shot, no second chance. The exact lesson a father wanted his son to learn before he ever touched a repeater. Boys across America carried the Model 37 into the squirrel woods at dawn, the cold steel biting their fingers, the Winchester name on the barrel making them feel like real hunters. The single shot taught patience and humility and the value of a careful shot, and it did it for less money than almost any gun on the shelf. When Winchester reorganized in the 1960s, the Model 37 was discontinued and the world moved on to pumps and autoloaders. But no gun ever filled the role better. For the boy who learned to hunt with a Winchester Model 37, it was the gun that started a lifetime. The humble single shot that turned a kid into a hunter and a memory into a legend. That's our countdown of the 15 forgotten shotguns that armed America's young hunters. Maybe one of these was your first gun, or your father's, or your grandfather's. Tell me in the comments which one you carried on that first cold morning in the woods, and whether you've still got it tucked away somewhere. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.